it's your boy, Dewan Lightfoot. Today, I have the one and only Deirra Footman. She's I think multiple CCNA network engineer, senior network engineer now, I believe. She just started the 100 Days of Code, and she's from the DMV. I love the DMV. What's good, Deirra?
Hey, everybody. Finally kicking this interview off.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for taking the time to come on YouTube, share your knowledge and experience, which I think is a good place to begin. You want to tell people about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Deirra Footman. I'm a senior network engineer for a professional services company in Baltimore. We support a publishing organization and email service provider. Um, been in IT for almost 10 years now in networking. I started out in the Cisco Networking Academy in high school. From there, got an internship and at our Baltimore City schools. Um, was hired on as a contractor and then promoted to a full-time employee. And the rest is history.
That's what's up. Hey, so you started off with Cisco in high school. I'm
Mhm.
hearing a lot of people who are able to do that in high school. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I went to a vocational school, and one of the trades or career paths, as they're called now, was the Cisco Networking Academy. It was a 3-year program. The first year went over the basics of how computers function, um, basically followed the curriculum of the A plus certification. And then our next 2 years were spent in Cisco, so learning about home and small business networks, basic configurations of switches and routers, um, and basics in information security. And upon graduating, we were able to take our A plus exam. And unfortunately, my class did not get to do our CCNA, but we got all the material for it. So we could go ahead and self study and pass the test.
Okay. So you end up self-studying to pass the CCNA?
Mhm.
That's what's up. Now, you said after high school, you immediately went into an internship?
Yeah, so the second semester of our senior year, we all got to apply for internships, and I was selected to work at Baltimore City Public Schools in the network department. 4 hours a day. We went at the end of our school day. So I pretty much started off just doing tickets and getting a feel for the type of troubleshooting I might run into.
Okay.
So it was a lot of port configurations when people moved, making sure their phones were working, making sure they were on the correct VLANs and had access to everything. From there, I was hired on full time, and I still continued like that first level at tier one network troubleshooting. And then as I did more work and proved myself a little bit more, I was brought in to sit in on projects. Not really 100% of project resource, but just to get the exposure to it. And then I eventually worked my way up to being a lead engineer on several projects for that
Okay.
organization.
Cool. Now, for someone that may be interested in doing an internship,
Mhm.
that's looking to get in IT, how do you recommend them following in your footsteps to do the same thing?
Um, if you're, I would start reaching out to places like local school districts, small businesses who have a need for like an IT staff or a person with these skills, but they might not have the budget to really afford the people who've been in the game for a while. Because my advice is always go for the experience first, the money will come. And that was my path. I started out making minimum wage, just there, running tickets, taking notes, soaking up as much information as I could. So and also reach out to local recruiting agencies. I know one that's really big in the DMV is Tech Systems, looking for entry level positions that can just get you that exposure and get you your hands on the cables, your hands on the switches, and take lots of notes.
For sure. That's some great advice. Thank you. Now, you have a goal of achieving your CCIE by 30. That's your blog,
Yeah.
your Twitter handle, and all that good stuff. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So when I first started out, everyone was just so impressed with how I soaked up information and everything. And I'm 27 now, so I started straight out of high school at 18. So everyone's like, "Oh, you'll be like a CCIE by the time you're 25." And I would just like laugh it off because the thought of that test terrified me.
Right.
So then, once I finally got in the groove of studying and taking the certs, I'm like, well, this actually is like attainable if I set out a plan and dedicate myself to it. So I'm like, okay. The end of 2016, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna just go for it. I'm gonna try to get my CCIE by the time I'm 30. Sit for my written exam when I'm 28. Take that time and just dedicate time to the lab, and hopefully I'll have my plaque by my 30th birthday.
You
Um,
right.
yeah. So this year was supposed to be dedicated completely to me working on my CCNP,
Right.
and then Cisco changed things up,
I know,
as
right?
they do. So I'm like, I got about 9 months between now and then. Do I still want to try to pursue the CCNP in that 9 months, or do I want to wait and take the new exam? So I've decided to wait and take the new exam. I'm still going to continue to study
Right.
because I want to try to make that date. So they go live February 20th. So I want to try to make my first attempt by March, just to at the new exam and the core exam, and then the specialty exam,
Right. Right.
and then start my CCIE journey.
Yeah, you got a lot of experience. You could even skip the CCNP and take the CCI written right now if you wanted to.
That's what everyone keeps telling me.
For
And I'm
seriously,
like, that's tempting.
you have a whole lot of experience. I'm sure you would do well. So now, all right, you have your blog, you have the CCIE by 30. You were transitioning from, I guess, being, what were you, a technician in Baltimore School Districts or?
I made it to engineer,
Okay.
and then from there, I did a federal contract for 6 months, and then from there, I went to a company where I was doing collaboration. So call manager, Unity, WebEx. Um, got some experience there. Now I'm here at my current job as an engineer again.
Okay.
Mhm.
You were able to get some really good experience very fast in your career at a very young age. I commend you for,
Thank you.
staying dedicated and doing what you do and taking time to help others. So,
Mhm. My motto is somebody helped me. I didn't just learn all this. Like, I did a lot of self study, of course, but it always helps to have somebody you can, like, hey, I'm not really understanding the way the book is breaking this down. Can you, provide some clarity? Or the book says it should work like this, but in the data center, it's like nothing compared to that.
right.
And just having somebody to like guide you through or bounce questions off of is super helpful. So I
For
want to
sure.
be that person for people.
You're doing that. And what you're doing that, you started the 100 days of code for
Mhm.
like network automation in Python. You want to talk a little
Yeah,
bit about
that completely blew up
that?
so quickly. So when I was looking at the exam blueprints for all the new exams, I noticed one of the objectives is network automation. I'm not a huge fan of programming and coding. I have some
Right.
HTML experience, but it just wasn't my cup of tea.
Right.
So fast forward years later, it's like that's the way the industry is moving. So I need to learn it to keep my skills tight, stay marketable, etc. So I'm like, oh, I should just do like 100 days of code. A lot of people I follow who are programmers, I've followed some of their blogs, learning like JavaScript and all of those different languages. So I'm like, maybe I should like do that for Python. And I'm like, well, it'd be cool if like I could do like a little study group. So I tweet out like, hey, who would be interested if I do a study group? And I get like 30 replies. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'm gonna just set up a Slack channel, like join. I wake up the next day, it's 300 people in the Slack channel.
Right.
I'm like, oh crap, everybody wants to know this. I wake up, I go to lunch, I check my phone, it's 400 people. I'm like, oh, this is like blowing up. And now I got people reaching out to me on Twitter like, hey, I have some experience or I took the cert. Can I be a mentor? I would love to jump in. And I'm like, yeah, sure.
Right.
So I'm my plan was to start July 1st after I finish up my schoolwork for the term. So I'm getting all these questions like, hey, what are we going to be using? So now I got to sit down and like iron everything out. It just came at me so fast, but
Right.
I'm super excited to get started and help everybody. And I think there was some confusion around that people thought I was going to be teaching Python. I'm like, no, I'm all new to this. I'm going to be learning right along with you.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to get it started. And it's really amazing to just something started out as a tweet with like 30 people like, yeah, sure, that sounds interesting, to like a group of 500 very hungry, very knowledgeable people ready to knock it out the park. So I'm
Yeah,
excited.
for sure. Automation, as everybody knows, like Deirra mentioned, is changing as far as what the requirements are to be in networking.
Yep.
Are you seeing that in your industry right now, like in your environment?
So no, we in my environment right now, the biggest focus is AWS in the cloud.
Okay.
Um, because we work with a lot of businesses, we decided we already had like a few of our publishers reach out saying like, oh, well, we're just going to put this in AWS. We don't need to host it at your facility.
Mm.
So we're like, okay, we need to get ahead of this and iron out, like set up our environment and then iron out what services we're going to offer.
Right.
A couple of side projects going on, like one of my coworkers is learning Ansible. And so I've kind of played around with that and seen how we can like automate some things in our test environment.
Right.
But we haven't put anything like fully into production yet. But it's coming as
Okay.
we grow and expand the business. It just makes more sense to be able to automate things and not have to send somebody or have somebody on site to type in a few lines of commands and a switch. So
Yeah, it definitely makes sense, and it gives you more time, frees up a lot of time for you to focus on higher priorities. You know what I mean? So
mhm.
now, what about ACI? Are you saying ACI like in your environment?
Yep. So my organization is doing an ACI deployment this year.
Okay.
So I went to some trainings on it. I've been doing some of the Cisco D Cloud labs
Yeah.
just to keep it fresh. We haven't ordered our equipment yet, but it's definitely coming and we're preparing for it. Setting up a HA, a high availability site for some of our applications. So we're very early in the planning stages of it, but it's coming. I'm excited about that too. It's so cool.
It is, and with us talking about automation, with us talking about ACI, and just everything moving towards the cloud, that's when like we start talking about DevOps.
Mm-hmm.
So, is your organization or also talking about moving to DevOps? Because what I found in organizations that are doing automation or attempting to automate, they're not actually implementing DevOps well. And so it
Mm-hmm.
kind of causes operations to fall behind and not be able to keep up.
So we started about 6 months ago with a big push into like agile project management.
Right.
So agile is built on a lot of those DevOps fundamentals. So as we've been learning and moving through that, there's been some focus on learning how DevOps works and kind of changing our teams, taking what we can out of the DevOps principles and then applying them to our team. So we all got, and I posted this book on Twitter, on
The
my
DevOps
Instagram. We all got
handbook.
this book,
Yeah.
and it's been super helpful. I feel like it's made me a better engineer.
Picked up this book,
Oh, okay.
The Phoenix Project, and the DevOps handbook is more of like what DevOps is. The Phoenix Project is actually a company
Yeah, I
was
think they
founded.
mentioned that on here.
Yeah, a
Mm-hmm.
company, and it tells a story about how um, uh, uh, he's like an IT manager, or he was actually leading the team and became
Mm-hmm.
an IT manager, even though he didn't want to. and he decided to implement DevOps to turn around the organization and keep them from failing. So it tells a real interesting story to see how DevOps is implemented, and it's a good read. So
I have to check that out.
Yeah, cool, man. There's so many changes. We're talking about DevOps, talking about automation, talking about your 100 days of code. What do you think about all the changes that are going on in the industry right now?
It excites me. One thing that I love about tech is it's constantly changing. You can never get bored unless you choose to.
Right.
It's always new challenges, new stuff to learn. I'm always amazed at stuff that I learned like 5 years ago that was like, this was the hottest thing ever.
Right.
Is now like, oh, your organization's doing that. So it keeps me. I always like learning new things, and being in a job where I have to constantly learn really helps me because it keeps your brain healthy.
Right.
Studies show one of the best ways to keep your mental health where it needs to be is to be constantly learning new things. And what better way than what you spend 40 hours a week doing, your job.
For sure.
So I'm always excited to learn new things. I think everybody was thrown for a little loop when Cisco announced those certification changes, but you just gotta learn about it, digest it, and figure out your plan or adjust your plan if necessary.
Yeah, that's really a part of being in IT is all this change happens. Like you said, 5 years down the line, things are just different.
Mm-hmm. Like 5 years down the line, we're gonna be like ACI. Oh, please. This new hot acronym Cisco's come out with. So.
Right. So it's always good to be ahead of the curve. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Now, speaking of being ahead of the curve, I actually have two questions, and I'll start here with when you actually look for jobs, do you actually think about and ask what they have in their environment, and that kind of leads to your decision towards applying for a job or taking a job?
So for me, my job search strategy has always been looking at what the requirements are and then figuring out what I want to learn.
Right.
So when I took my job where I was focused more on collaboration, at the time I thought, maybe that was something I would want to specialize in. So at Baltimore City Schools, we got the ability to touch a lot of different technologies because we were such a small team and we had a tight budget. So if we had a project like, oh, we got to redo our call center, it's not exactly an option to just hire outside consultants. Like, no, you guys need to learn what you can and let's make this work, and call TAC if you need help.
Right.
So I did enjoy some of the back end stuff with call managers. So I'm like, oh, well, let's get some exposure to it. Gotten the job. I did not really like it. It's like day-to-day work. Just
no
because
projects.
No real projects outside of like upgrades or something, or like doing a deployment. So I'm like, this is a little too stagnant for me.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Especially coming from primarily networking, where it's kind of some excitement, like, oh, we're standing up a new network, or you're constantly trying to improve your existing network. Like, oh, we got a project to move from EIGRP to OSPF. Oh, okay, I know nothing about OSPF. Let me go learn that.
Right.
So when I took this particular job, it was a chance for me to get back into networking, and they are very service provider data center focused.
Right.
So I think that's the route I'm going to be going down more, data center with some security. So this environment gives me a chance to focus on the data center, learn some security, learn some cloud, and go from there.
And I honestly believe those are like the two safest areas, like to get certified and learn in Cisco right now. Firewalls, ASAs aren't going anywhere. ICE is really picking up steam. And then when you look at Cisco DNA and what that's going to be doing to the network with intent-based networking, and now the data center with ACI, and then they still have Fabric Pad. It's right. Those are good choices.
And my favorite saying is, the cloud is nothing but a data center. It's just somewhere off somewhere. So
don't ask a Microsoft trainer that about Azure. They won't admit that, but yeah, it's definitely just multiple data centers interconnected. So speaking of the cloud and things like that, I saw at one point you were studying for AWS.
Mm-hmm. Still am.
Okay, how's that going?
It's going great. I take the test again next week. So I failed my first attempt. It's the solutions architect exam.
Okay.
And the reason I started there instead of just specialty is I kind of wanted to understand how the entire piece works as a whole,
right,
instead of just focusing on the network piece. So my biggest challenge with the exam was more so AWS has tons of services and you need to know a little bit about all of them.
yeah.
So that was where I met my challenge, was just remembering each service and the scenarios where you would use the services.
It sounds like it has like an account manager portion of managing AWS.
Yep. So it's everything from, here's how you spin up servers. Here's the basics of the networking with VPCs. Here's some basics in security. Here's the basics in account management. And then here are add-on services that you can use to connect in. Ones we recommend, ones that are optional, and then you really understanding how to basically build an AWS environment from scratch.
Okay.
So after taking that exam, you could just get an AWS account, build a few services, a few servers, a few EC2 instances, connect up your S3 storage, and then build in a VPC. And here's the account and identity management portion of it. And then here's the management, or the network management and monitoring portion of it. So it's basically like your foundation to build your own little AWS environment. And then you can branch off into the specialties. So it doesn't do like a deep dive into networking or a deep dive into security. It's just that surface level to get you up and running.
Okay. Yeah, I just got my AWS, my Azure Foundation cert, and it sounds really similar to that. Just introduced me to Azure and said, okay, this is the pricing. This is how you build a VM and everything else. So now, when you were talking about, learning and getting jobs, how do you focus on, learning something new and balancing what you're learning to be efficient and outstanding in your current position?
So that's really a challenge in like time management and prioritizing.
Okay.
So I really gauge it based on, I always try to do what I can for work first.
Yeah.
Because that's what pays the bills and enables me to study on my own.
Right.
And I'm luckily in an environment where I can choose projects, for the most part, choose projects that align with what my goals are.
That's good stuff.
So, example, I had a goal of like, I've worked with ICE before, but I've never really like dug in and set it up. So I had a goal of learning more about ICE.
Right.
So when the project came up for us to do 802.1x, I'm like, oh yeah, I have some experience with that. I haven't worked with the ICE piece of it, but I'm willing to learn. So then that was my priority, to learn that. And it aligns with my goals of being more well-versed in security.
Right.
So AWS is really a side project for me. Our team, the network team, isn't super involved in it as like our server team is. But when it came to putting together, we have a committee that we put together and planning for this. When it came to putting that together, I volunteered to be on the committee because I do want to learn a little bit more about AWS, just to keep myself, marketable skill-wise. So I spend more time learning about security than AWS, but I try to balance both of them out. Right. I try to balance balance it based on my priorities and volunteer for stuff at work that aligns with my goals. So just to give a little bit more, like we're not working with Python or automation right now. So that's kind of a lower priority for me.
Right.
So I'm going to just dedicate like that 1 hour a day to watching videos or going over the training resources that I have versus ACI, which is work related and more of a priority to me. I'm going to spend more time making sure I'm well versed in that versus Python. So
Right.
it's a trade off.
That's what's up. That's what's up. I kind of do, like, I try to learn so much, and sometimes I drive myself crazy, and that's why I'm so adamant about taking notes. You know what I mean? Because it's like the more information I take in, the more I forget. You know what I mean? So
I think
now,
somebody on Twitter said with the CCIE, you're never really learning all the things. You're just filling the cup with holes in it.
that's
I'm
funny.
like, that's true.
That's funny. All right, kind of shifting gears. But I got a couple questions in regards to people that are looking to get in IT. It's 2019. Entering IT is kind of changing. Then, yeah. Because back in the day, you know, you could get a certification or have a degree and you find a job. But now it's getting a little harder because it's getting competitive. What tips do you have for someone that's looking to get into IT? And then what tips do you have for someone that's looking to advance beyond that entry level?
Okay. So if you're just first time IT job, I always tell people, and this depends on your situation, but if you can go and get like say you're fresh off of your CCNA, if you can go and get a job as a network technician, even if it's contract or a little bit lower on the pay scale, go ahead and do it just to get the experience. And when you get in there, have your notebook handy, take as many notes as you can, volunteer to get your hands on as much stuff as you can. Seek out small businesses, school districts, even some of the local governments because they need people with these skills, but they can't always pay the top dollar for the more experienced people.
Right.
Those are always my first two places to target. If you've been in IT for a while, and this happened to me at the school system, it can be very easy to get comfortable in an environment. And then you wake up one day like, wow, I kind of don't want to do this no more. I want to do something else.
Right.
And depending on your environment, there might not be a path for that. Or one thing with like government is people never leave. They just so you're kind of like stuck in your position unless somebody retires or something. So I always tell people like don't be afraid to leave or look for another job, but have a plan.
Right.
So for me, if for example, let's say I wanted to just pivot straight into security. So my job has nothing to do with security, but I would take my off time to start studying for those certifications, figuring out if, you know, working with my coworkers, like, hey, so I'm learning this. Do you have anything? Can I sit in on some meetings? Do you have some projects I can sit in on just to better understand, you know, what's going on? And if you have the capacity in your job to do that, reach out to the security team, tell them, hey, I'm learning this. I get you might not be comfortable with me touching anything right now, but can I sit in on some of your meetings? Can I understand, you know, some of the projects you're working on just to get yourself some exposure to it?
Right.
And then when you go off into that, and this is a big thing, and I feel like somebody needs to like teach a class on this transferable skills. I think a lot of people in IT fear that if they change lanes, they're going to lose their previous experience won't matter.
Right.
So me pivoting into security, no, yes, I'm new to security and I could technically be considered entry level, but I have 10 years of IT and networking experience.
Right.
And being able to relate that experience to your new position and negotiate your salary using that. So I don't think there's enough focus on that, because
Yeah.
I've talked with people who are like, oh, well, if I go over to security, like I was a phone guy. Like how I'm gonna be starting over. I'm gonna be starting from the bottom. And it's like, well, no, let's talk about the security features and call manager.
Right.
Like relate that to that. Let's talk about, you weren't a network engineer, but you did have to understand networking to get these phones up. Let's,
Yeah.
parlay that into some of your security experience. So
That's a great point, because if you've been in IT, what, 5, 10 years, you probably
mhm.
have some project experience, and that's important. And you probably are used to managing ticketing systems, working with customers, and all of those things that they don't have to worry about you coaching you in that area. They just have to teach you the basic job skills,
Right.
the applications that you'll be using and stuff like that. So that's a great point.
Yeah, I think that should be we should do like a video on that, negotiating transferable skills.
Let's make it
That's a good
happen.
idea.
Let's make it happen. Speaking of video, I think it would be pretty cool if we can get a couple other women and you all, whether it's on like your YouTube channel or something, and you all talk about being a minority woman in tech. I
Mhm.
don't think that's discussed enough, especially not in the network engineer realm, because you're rare. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, I'm definitely down with that. I think for me, my biggest issue was um, I've been fortunate enough to work in very diverse or primarily Black environments.
You're in the DMV.
Um, yeah. But I think what my personal challenge was I'm always the youngest person on the team,
Right.
and I'm usually the only female. Um, One time within our department, outside of our DevOps crew. So for me, imposter syndrome was like very big for me.
Mm.
And overcoming challenges of like, I know I've done the research, I know I'm right, but then being able to present that and in your head just feeling like, oh, well, no, I only got this many years of experience, or I'm only 24 and they've been doing this for so long.
Yeah.
And um, I've been fortunate to be able to have mentors in my environment to just be like, hey, so I know so and so said this, and so is like the lead engineer, and what he says goes. It's like, yeah, but I was researching this, and I think this is a better way to do it. How should I go about presenting that? And them giving me advice on how to either present it to the entire group or just, how to present it to that particular person,
Right.
and um, backing up my idea. So I'm like, oh, well, I think we should stick with EIGRP for this because best practices say this, and here's how this applies to our environment. And, here's what I used to come up with this conclusion, and just press and send and seeing how it goes. In some cases, it's gone perfectly well, and my idea was chosen. In other cases, it was shot down.
Right.
Sometimes for actual solid technical reasons, sometimes not. And
Right.
you have to be able to brush it off and not let it affect you and move forward. It gets easier with practice.
Yeah.
It's very few people I've met, very few women I've met who just walk in there like, hey, we should do it this way, and here's why.
Right.
I would just be like, oh, I need to like rehearse and write APA formatted paper. Like,
Nah, I feel you. It takes a lot to build confidence, you know what I mean, in
mhm,
this industry. And it can be quickly tore down, that one
yeah,
project or that one instance where you overlook something or you just get over your head in the situation and you ain't got no help. That can kill your confidence.
that
So
has happened to me. bought the data center now.
Hey, me too. Me too. But you learn from it and you grow from it. You know what I mean? That's how you get to where you are. That's how you get that ownership and that patience when it comes to troubleshooting and projects and stuff. So.
Yep. I've seen people just, and I mean, when I was just supposed to be like swapping out an optic, and this was like maybe my very, very early on with me working with the Nexus. I'm like, oh yeah, I can just swap out the optic. I did the research. It was supposed to be like non-service impacting. And I don't know, with the Nexus, you usually have two of them.
Right.
And depending on if they're set up in VPCs with the peer link, so they appear as one unit. The worst case scenario is for them to split and both start routing traffic. And they're not supposed to, because you have redundant links. And that's what happened. It was a split brain scenario.
Split brain, man.
And I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? Like,
shut it down.
I'm getting all types of errors, like BPDU guards going off. I'm like, reboot. So I had heard about it. So it immediately, because when we were setting them up, Cisco's like, yeah, you want to watch out for this. If they go into a split brain scenario and they're both active, it can cause all types of problems. And I'm like, so I knew what happened from the symptoms. So I'm like flipping out. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. And I go upstairs and like I explain what happened and send it out. And my boss is like, oh, okay, cool. Welcome to the club. You broke something. And I'm like, oh, is that easy?
Yeah. It's always good to be like, and I don't think people ever really talk about this. When you get in those small environments that where you're just doing support, you're not really supporting like clients like in an MSP where everything is based off of profit. So if you're in a small environment, you're just supporting that company, you have like more responsibility and you can break stuff and get away with it kind of.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's always good to get started.
Less people to answer to.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody's like, we lost $3 million doing this outage.
Yes. Yeah. People get fired that way. So
yeah.
That's cool. Hey, yeah, I know you have like a busy day and all this stuff. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Before we're up out of here, is there anything that you want to say to the audience and to people that want to follow you and all that good stuff?
Yeah, commit to your learning. One thing about tech is you're never going to stop learning if you want to keep progressing. Just really commit to that, and that is the job. Basically, our job is to learn and to continue to learn. And changes happen. You have to change your plans, but just learn what you need to learn, adapt your plan, and keep moving forward. I saw so many people, when Cisco announced these certification changes, like, I've been studying for my CCNA security for like 3 months now. It don't matter. Like, what am I going to do? And it's like, keep going. The content's still relevant. It's not changing. It's just the method in which you apply it change.
True story.
So that would be my advice. Like, commit to your learning, make a plan. If you need to change your plan, change it, but keep going.
That's some great advice. Now, for the 100 Days of Code, yes. I'm going to put a link in the description. You want to say something about that before we go?
Sure. I did a live video answering some of these questions, but I can say it again. It starts July 1st. Commit what time you can. If anybody's familiar with the 100 Days of Code challenge, it's just 3 rules. You commit 1 hour a day, and you check in on Twitter with your other community who's doing it. In this case, check in on Twitter, check in on Slack. Just let people know, hey, I covered this topic. Here's what I learned. If you got questions, ask the questions. That's what the community's for. I am not teaching Python. I will be learning right along with everybody else.
Yeah.
Let's just rock out for these 100 days, and hopefully at the end we're all more knowledgeable about Python basics and our Python in our areas. And I don't think I talked about this, but the way it's going to be structured is the first half of the challenge, we're going to be all learning about the basics of the language and the structures. And then somebody had the great idea to spend like the second half of the challenge learning it as it relates to our focus areas. So there's a network channel in there. There's a channel for AWS. There's a channel for system administrators. There's a channel for people who want to pursue the Python cert, which I think I'm going to do just because I'm learning it. And it's like, oh, hey, little piece of paper that said I did this thing.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm excited. I owe everybody a blog post with research and like the resources and the outline of how we're going to be approaching it. So I'm going to get that up by tomorrow.
Cool. I'll share it in this video when I post it. It'll be in there as well too.
Okay.
So
awesome. All
right. Now, how can people connect with you? You want to shout out your social media links?
Yep. I am CCIE30 on all channels. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
Okay.
I'm going to be posting more video content this summer, particularly with the 100 Days of Code. So that'll all be on my YouTube channel.
Cool.
Yep. So that's it. And the website is CCIEBY30.com. And yeah, subscribe to my mailing list.
For sure. She puts out great content. So, hey, dear, I want to say thank you for taking time out your day to come on to YouTube to talk about your journey and all this good stuff. It's
Thanks
been
for having me.
For sure. It's been a great interview, and I hope that we can, bring some more women together, either on your channel or you on my channel, to actually talk about, the network engineer journey for you all.
Yeah, I'm down with that. That would be awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. See you guys.